It's been 6 months since the iPhone 11 Pro Max came out, so this is what it's like to use 6 months down the road. If you haven't already and like the videos that we do on the channel, then please subscribe and make sure you leave a like as well. iPhones are always phones that I come back to eventually, and I've been using the iPhone 11 Pro since launch. You get what you expect with an iPhone. They're a little bit boring, but they do the job. When the iPhone 11 Pro Max was released, it was £1,049. £1,049. And for that £1,049, Apple gave you an embarrassing 64 gigabytes of storage. No phone that costs £1,000 plus should be coming with 64 gigabytes of storage. It's embarrassing. Although having said that, I've made the 64 gigabytes of storage work fairly well, and I've probably got about 30 gigabytes of that storage left, because as much as I can, I'll try and store everything in the cloud. One of my favorite things that came with the iPhone 11 Pro Max when it was released was that frosted glass back. And I don't use a case, so I'm always touching the back of my phone. And with the frosted glass back, you don't see fingerprints at all, especially on this gold one, and it just doesn't show any scratches. The notch on this phone was as big as ever, but they needed that notch to keep hold of those Face ID sensors. And Face ID is probably one of the best features that Apple have ever introduced into one of their phones. And I've used the Galaxy S20 over the past couple of weeks, and the Face Unlock on that, compared to the Face Unlock on the iPhone, is just nowhere close. The screen on the iPhone 11 Pro Max is a 6.5-inch Ultra Retina display, and it looks great. Watching anything on this, if you're using Apple TV, if you're going to use YouTube, it's just brilliant. And also it gives you that option to watch HDR content, which makes the colors and everything on the screen look even better. Let's talk about the battery. The battery seems to be one of the things that people are most interested in when talking about the iPhone 11 Pro Max. And 6 months ago, I said it was the best battery you could get on a phone. 6 months later, I completely stand by it. The battery on this phone is ace. It's hands down my favorite thing on this phone, and I can't remember getting to the end of the day at all in the last 6 months and having less than 10%. In fact, I've gone almost 2 days without charging the phone and only plugged it in those 2 days because I was scared of letting the battery run out. Low power mode is something I've rarely even used on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, whereas on my other iPhones, low power mode was an absolute necessity every single day, whereas on this phone, it's just not. I'm just happy that the trend of slightly bigger phones and slightly bigger batteries is now a thing. The battery health on my phone is 97%, which is probably a bit lower than I was expecting it to be. A couple of weeks ago, it was sat at 100%, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it still holds its charge fully. And then my screen on time seems to be between 6 and 7 hours, and that's before I even think about having to charge it again. And then when I do think about charging it, the phone finally comes shipped with that fast charger, so it charges in no time. Now the camera, and I don't take a huge amount of photos on this phone, so my take on this might be slightly different to other people's, but let's just say that they are brilliant. The cameras on the iPhone 11 Pro Max are up there with some of the best that you can get on a phone. And the telephoto lens is probably the lens that I use the least. And if you compare that to the S20, which I've been using over the past couple of weeks as well, then this kind of lacks just slightly. The main camera, though, on this is ace, and every photo it takes is almost as realistic to life as you can get. The colors are fantastic, and it doesn't blow out any of the highlights in things like the sky. Then you've got the wide angle, which is useful, but something I've not used a huge amount of. And I've only ever used it when I went on holiday, and besides that, I just haven't used it. The one feature that I have used on the camera more than anything though is night mode. This was the first time that Apple had introduced night mode onto one of their phones, and it's the feature that I use the most. It can take almost entirely dark situations and make them look great. The phone isn't without its faults though, and mainly I'm going to put that down to iOS 13. iOS 13 has been buggy as hell, and sometimes that's just random crashes. It's the app's not opening, it's not being able to use the camera, and sometimes the phone's just not usable, so it has to be restarted. But I'm going to put that down to iOS 13 and not the hardware, because the iPhone 11 Pro Max comes with that A13 Bionic chip. That A13 Bionic chip makes everything so quick, so snappy, everything is done before I even want it to be done. The overall condition of this phone, now I look after my phones quite well. Even though I don't use use a case. I've never dropped an iPhone or ever smashed one, thank God. But the condition of this phone looks like I got it out the box a week or so ago. The stainless steel sides leave barely any scratches. That matte back finish as well with the frosted glass, you can barely see any fingerprints or any scratches on that. So the condition of the iPhone 6 months later is still brilliant. The phone overall though is still my favorite phone that's out there. If you gave me the option to pick between the Galaxy S20 Ultra, the Pixel 4 or the iPhone 11 Pro Max, I'd go iPhone every time. They could improve on a couple of things and make this phone a little bit more daring and make it exciting to own an iPhone again, which makes this phone a little bit boring, but sometimes boring is best.